Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Yashik, and I'm a member of the team of communication specialists at Grassroots Public Affairs. Welcome to our webinar, Effective Advocacy Skills for 2023. We are mindful of how important your time is, so we're committed to starting and ending promptly. This webinar will wrap up at 1 p.m. sharp. However, if anyone is interested in sticking around after 1, the Grassroots team are happy to stay on and answer any questions you might have. Today's session is being recorded for future reference and can be made available to you upon request. My colleague, Reem Wahab, will be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions or comments, please enter them there. To keep you involved, we have a few quick polling questions that will pop up on your screen. Your answers will help us frame the narrative around some sections of the next hour, so we hope you will participate. You will also receive a very short post-webinar survey that will help us improve on the value we bring to our clients. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback and thank you in advance for taking just a moment to complete it. Maybe check your spam if you don't see it in your inbox. Okay, let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce Peter Seemann. He is the founder, CEO, and principal consultant at Grassroots Public Affairs. Peter.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you to everyone that's joining online, wherever you may be in this big country of ours. Thrilled that so many people elected to spend their lunch hour with us. And as Lindsay mentioned, we are committed to giving you as much value and information as we can over the next 60 minutes. I want to just mention quickly that we had planned this webinar late last year when things were finally opening up after a 2-year lengthy pandemic, and we had entitled it Advocacy Skills Post-Pandemic. For reasons I won't get into, I wasn't able to pull that one off, but we rescheduled it now. Unsure about how many people may still want to participate, attend, and listen to what we have to share with you today. Thrilled that so many folks from so many different organizations are joining and looking forward to seeing folks in person increasingly as things have been opening up. We have also done a couple of workshops in person, and we're looking forward to bringing those back in our calendar of scheduled events for later this year. In the survey Lindsay mentioned, we'll be asking for your opinions on what formats might work best and might be of best interest. I just wanted to mention Grassroots philosophy, and some of you who have worked with us may know this already. Grassroots Public Affairs fundamentally believes that the very best people to speak for an association or an industry are the people like you that live and breathe that industry each and every day. You have the education, the experience, and the passion to represent your industry when speaking to government. We as consultant lobbyists work best when we assist organizations, helping them ensure that their message is targeted to the right people at the right level of government. And we use our 3C model of success focused on clarity, consistency, and collaboration. One of the things that we also do, obviously, for our clients is we monitor the media and we watch the news. And what we're going to do here, first off, after I show you our quick agenda where we've done introductions, we're going to take a look at the federal political landscape and then the Ontario political landscape. And then we're going to spend a bit of time on communication skills as it relates to advocacy and lobbying for your industry. Hopefully, we'll have a few minutes at the end to take any questions or answers. So let's get started. Grassroots teams here, as I mentioned, and we're thrilled to have 2 special guest participants today, 2 individuals that have been very gracious with their time in the past when we've done in-person workshops. And that's Sabrina and Nanji, who will be talking with me on the provincial political landscape, and Gerry Nicholls, who I'll introduce in a moment as we get focused on the federal political landscape. So here we go, federal politics. I'm thrilled to be joined with Chris Gray, our senior consultant in Ottawa. Chris handles all our federal work that we manage for clients on the Hill. Chris, you can turn your camera on if you can see us. There you come. And Chris and I have had the good pleasure of working together for about 10 years. He's been full-time with Grassroots for 5 or 6, maybe more. He's a political veteran from the Hill, worked in a cabinet minister's office, and has also worked for a great number of organizations outside of politics, including the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and thrilled to have him here. Welcome, Chris. And Gerry, if you can hear me, turn on your camera. Gerry Nicholls, you probably have seen Gerry on TV. He's been a political commentator spokesperson on elections and all sorts of things. And his Twitter handle says he's even slightly cuter than Justin Trudeau. So gents, I'm thrilled to have you both here today. What I'd like to do is spend about 10 minutes and talk about some of the issues that are on the Hill. Sorry, Chris, we're going to go back and we're going to get your feedback on some of the top issues. So 1 second.
Sure.
So you're going to give us a bit of a perspective on what's going on in Ottawa.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. It's great to be here, and really happy to be able to bring some political flavor here. Just a couple of quick slides here on really how busy the Ottawa landscape has been. 2022 was the busiest year for registered communications on the Hill. In 2022, there were 33,000 communication reports put into the lobby registry. That is versus the last record, which was 30,000 in 2020. So you can see, obviously, there's a continued increase in how many people are reaching out to elected officials in Ottawa and all kinds of government officials. So the landscape continues to get more crowded. The busiest month in 2022 was November, and the Finance Committee also last year received 1,200 submissions to their process, which is approximately double what it was in the previous year. So again, just to show you how busy it has been in Ottawa over the last year and continues to get more busy. The top ministers lobbied in 2022. This is actually a snapshot from the month of December. So we have the Minister of Innovation, Minister Champagne, was leading #1, and he was lobbied 261 times in the month of December alone. And then we have Minister Wilkinson at Natural Resources, and Minister Guilbeault was the third highest at Environment and Climate Change.
So the reason we bring that up, and I often ask Chris to take a look at those statistics, and we talk to clients, and when you're on the Hill or if you're at Queen's Park, you often think you're the only show in town because it is obviously the most important one for you. And in fact, these offices are just being bombarded, and it's only going up every year in terms of the amount of communications they're receiving. Speaks to the necessity to ensure that your messaging is clear and focused. Okay, gents, I want your feedback on a few topics first off. And I'm going to start with you, Chris, because I know that you are someone who is attached or had some experience working with the Liberal government. There's a first poll up on screen. We've asked people just to vote if you're so inclined to tell us what you think the #1 topic is or issue facing the government and politics in general in this winter spring session. Reem, maybe leave it up there for another 10, 15 seconds. But Chris, go ahead. Do you think Justin Trudeau is going to lead the Liberal Party in the next election? What and when might that be? What's your spidey senses telling you?
No, this is obviously a very hot topic as we are in a minority parliament. You never really know when the next election will be, but it is supposed to be in 2025, so in 2 years from now. My sense is that it won't last that long. My sense is that we will go to the polls at some point in 2024. And the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, will continue to be the leader of the Liberal Party and will lead them into the next election. He is very strong-willed, and I know for a fact that he wants to, he's relishing in the opportunity of taking on Mr. Poilievre. So my answer is yes, he will be there. He will lead them into the next election. We just have to wait till the polling numbers start to improve for them.
You might be waiting for a while. Okay, Gerry, what's your take?
Well, I suspect that right now the Liberals are doing a lot of polling, and they're trying to ascertain, is Justin Trudeau more popular than the Liberal brand, or is the Liberal brand more popular than Justin Trudeau? And if they determine that he is dragging down the Liberals, then I think there'll be a push for him to step aside. The Liberals are not sentimental. If they think he's a liability, they'll say goodbye. I think this is what happened to the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. They said, look, you're hurting the party, you got to go. There might even be some rogue Liberal polls out there asking about Chrystia Freeland, how she's doing. I don't know. But overall, I think I would agree with Chris. I think despite the fact that Trudeau has lost a lot of his luster, despite the fact that he might be reaching his expiry date as a politician, I still think he's the strongest asset the Liberals have right now. So I think they're going to go with him at least one more time.
Okay, so 2 for Justin. I'm going to be the outlier because everyone knows I'm the conservative consultant in Grassroots, and I volunteered on Mr. Poilievre's campaign. I have a feeling there will be a change in heart. We saw some poll numbers today that were good for the Conservatives. We hope, obviously, it will continue. And I think he doesn't want to go down losing, so he might just have a walk in the snow or the sand or somewhere else like his father and choose not to run. That's my pick. Let's go to the second topic. And Gerry, I'm going to start with you. This government, the Liberal government's propped up by the NDP. They're a minority coalition, sort of formal or informal. What are the factors that could influence how long this NDP party continues to prop up the Liberals? And will it be something that we can expect to last for the whole year? What's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure why the NDP got into this deal in the first place. I don't think it helps them. I think there's very little upside to it and a lot of downside to it. By connecting themselves with the Liberal government, this gives Pierre Poilievre an opportunity, because I think he's going to go after a lot of NDP voters in the next election. I think his plan is to sort of expand his populist base, and he can go after, the NDP saying, hey, you guys are elitist. You've been helping, Justin Trudeau and his World Economic Forum buddies. You're not looking after the working man. So that gives them a real opportunity. The problem for the NDP is I don't think they can disentangle themselves from this alliance very easily. I think the problem for them right now is they probably don't have any money. And so they don't want to have an election. So it's probably in their interest to, even though it's hurting them politically, to keep things in the status quo. So I imagine they're gonna stick to it for a while.
Chris, any thoughts on this, the coalition with the Liberals and NDP?
Yeah, no, I agree with Gerry. I believe that they are going to stick with this coalition for a while. It's working to a certain extent right now, and where Mr. Singh will continue to try and flex a little bit of muscle in the House and show what he's doing to continue to get the dental care program wider than it is right now, and he's really banging the drum on pharmacare. I thought it was interesting. Earlier this year, they put out through Twitter and through other social media their top 10 priorities and goals for 2023. So I thought that was actually a really interesting way of doing it, and boiling it down, as we've all learned, if you have 100 priorities, you have 0 priorities. So for them to focus on the top 10 they want to get done this year was quite bright.
Okay, so here's my prediction. I think the polling numbers are going to continue to deteriorate for the Liberals, and at some point, despite the fact not having any money and Mr. Singh still challenged to find lots of support out there, he might just walk away and not be wanting to be attached to a sinking ship. So we shall see. And the Conservatives' fortunes lie in the NDP always doing well in a federal election. We need that to happen. I'd like to share the results of the poll, and it's a good segue to our final question in this. And we asked people what they thought the number one issue was facing the winter-spring session, and maybe not surprisingly, inflation and rising cost of living, which we're hearing every day on the news. Gerry, any thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? Do you think that's going to continue to dominate? And maybe who's got the most to gain and most to lose for that from the 3 major political parties?
Well, what did James Carville famously say? It's the economy, stupid. That's always the case. The economy is always the number one issue. And I think luckily for Conservatives, rightly or wrongly, justly or not, a lot of people assume Conservatives are better economic managers than Liberals. So I think if the economy is the number one issue, if it's the number one point of mind for voters, that helps Pierre Poilievre. That's not to say other issues might not creep in. I see healthcare as an important one. That doesn't work well for the Conservatives, and that's something that the Liberals might try to latch onto to sort of turn the tide. But overall, I think, economy. If the economy is the issue, it helps the Conservatives.
I just want to note there, Peter, it's interesting. I don't believe anyone voted for the war in Ukraine, and I believe that is a bit of a sleeping giant, so to speak, and I believe that could become a quite a bit more serious issue as we move forward in 2023. That the whole world is going to have to continue to pay closer attention to.
Point taken. I would agree with Gerry's comments. Environment and healthcare and all these things are very important. But if your job is threatened and you can't make your car payment, or you feel you're going to lose your house, that takes priority over everything else. And Canada and Canadians have been living in a pretty good economic cycle for quite some time. And now we're starting to see some real challenges. So that's a bit of a review on the federal landscape. We'll continue to monitor that. Gerry, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you stick around for the rest of the discussion. Chris, thank you. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to pivot to provincial topics. And oh, Chris, we didn't cover this one. My apologies. Upcoming events. You want to talk on this just briefly?
Right. Yes. Sorry. Yes, we forgot to mention this. So these are just, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, Peter, but these are some of the things that I will be paying attention to and will be paying attention to moving forward. Obviously, the health ministers are meeting on February the 7th. We can definitely expect some noise coming out of that in the coming week, and hopefully the ministers will come to an agreement that works for all folks there. February 10th is the finance department's deadline on budget consultation. So this is a separate process than the finance committee did in the fall. This is one that the department is doing directly, and anyone, any organization, any individual can input into the process by February 10th. We're, of course, paying attention to when the next federal budget will be. This will again dictate potentially what the opposition parties do and how they react. But we expect that in our traditional time frame of late March, early April. And something that I will be paying attention to and will be attending will be the Liberal Convention, which will be in early May. And just a quick note on that, as we talk about Mr. Trudeau continuing on, obviously other folks are going to continue to lay the groundwork for a potential and future leadership run, if that's Minister Freeland, Champagne, Mark Holland, or even Anita Anand's name has come to the forefront. So those are some things that I'll be watching in the coming months.
Great. And we are going to be looking at the Conservative Convention coming up in September in Quebec City. I'm hoping Sabrina is online. If you are, Sabrina, turn your camera on. I think you said you're going to join us about now. There you are coming on. Hello, good to see you.
I'm here.
Good,
Hope you guys can hear me. After all this time, I still haven't gotten the hang of Zoom, believe it or not, but happy to be joining you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for those that aren't familiar with Sabrina, if you're not in Ontario or happen to be, haven't seen her work, we've had the great privilege of having her participate in one of our webinars that we did during the pandemic when we couldn't get together. She's been very generous with her time. We subscribe to her Queen's Park Observer publication, which monitors all the activities and events that are happening in and around Queen's Park. It's a great publication, and Sabrina has offered to give people a free trial. We're going to post a link in the chat box at the conclusion of this part, and it'll stay up for the rest of the webinar. So that's very generous of you, Sabrina, to do that. And let's take a pivot and quickly move into talk about some provincial politics. So unlike Chris, I don't have a lot of slides to talk about in terms of specific lobbying metrics, but having worked in and around Queen's Park, and I know you have, Sabrina, it's a busy place coming out of a lockdown period, and suddenly all the schedules for receptions and events are chock-a-block full right through into June. And what I wanted to talk about more specifically was just a little bit of the landscape going into the Ford government's second term. It's almost a year, 8 months ago, I guess, since they first got elected, got reelected with a big majority. And what I wanted to get your thoughts on first and foremost were, before we talk about that, what's your take on government, interacting with government down in and around Queen's Park? We've all gotten forced to have to get used to doing things virtually, and I know some people are still continuing to do that. But what's your take, having had conversations? Have things returned to normal pretty quickly? Are things going to forever be changed? Or just from a communication standpoint with government, how do you see the landscape having altered in the last couple of years and where we're looking forward to in the rest of this year?
Yeah, I think thankfully things are kind of returning to what we would call normal at Queen's Park. Just last fall, we've now got the return of stakeholder and lobbying receptions, which, has, I guess, as from a journalist perspective, it's, I've never met a journalist that doesn't like free food. So that's always great. But also it's kind of like this casual setting where we can, not only hear from the stakeholders who are putting on the event, a little bit more about the issues that are important to them and why they're there, because there's like a ton of policy changes happening these days at Queen's Park, which we can dig into more. But also it's a good place for good old fashioned gossip too, having a couple of ministers in there, people from all sides of the aisle, kind of rubbing shoulders. So those are slowly starting to come back. And I think it's been really a good thing for Queen's Park to have that type of interaction, because, as far as you're getting stories or ideas, like that kind of just happens in the hall when you're passing someone by face to face. I will say one challenge from maybe the communications perspective has been from the press gallery. I think, the good old fashioned scrums that we used to have when we're kind of all crowded around a minister, everyone's got their microphone shoved in someone's face to try and get the answers. Those, I don't really see those coming back anytime soon. And unfortunately, it's been a struggle to kind of get a straight answer, get the truth out of ministers and even opposition parties. We've kind of gotten used to this format of one question, one follow-up. It's a lot more choreographed. And so I do miss that, organic back and forth, which maybe now is more reserved for a question period, which we'll see come back. But, things are coming back slowly. And at this point, I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, absolutely. Must be much easier to have those conversations in the hallway when opportunities present themselves than sending emails or text messages. What's your take on the Ford government specifically? So a lot of celebration last June, although I think we still had one lockdown after that. Big super majority, bigger than before. Been a lot of staff changes. There's been some rumors of a cabinet shuffle. I don't know if you have any extra color to shed on that, but what's your take with respects to the government, maybe from 8 months ago, and even more importantly, pre-pandemic, when they were still figuring things out in their first term?
Yeah, I think definitely we've seen some changes, but also we're kind of getting used to this pattern of a playbook that we see from the Ford government. And so the mood has definitely shifted among the Tories right now. They were riding this high, a whopping bigger majority mandate in June. There wasn't much change, as you mentioned. There has been, this buzz about a cabinet shuffle. And I do think this is kind of the time that makes sense for the Ford government to do it. We're right ahead of the legislature coming back, kind of rejuvenate, that front bench for him. I don't think there's a lot of talk about, will he or won't he move Sylvia Jones, who has not had the best bedside manner, from an optics point of view, on a very, very hot potato political file over in health. But at this point, I don't think she's going anywhere. That could also backfire. We were used to having a steady hand in Christine Elliott on the health file throughout the pandemic. And so I don't think they're looking to rock the boat at this point on that front. But, things have definitely shifted. I think there's some chinks in the armor a little bit here, where we saw this in 2018, that after the PCs came to power, the Ford government kind of put out all of their potentially controversial or unpopular policies. And so I think they're feeling that burn a little bit, but we're right on the cusp of a budget. And so, I think we're going to see more of the return to their 2018 days when they were talking about cutting the gravy and holding in the reins. I don't think, unions are going to be happy about that, because this is all happening against the backdrop of negotiations with not only teachers, but most of the public sector. And so there's a lot of potential bombshells coming down the road. And I think the Ford government is feeling it a little bit. So it could still be a bit of a bumpy ride in terms of policy. They're going to want to get out these big, bold moves, if I can put it that way, as far out from 2026 as possible, because the electorate might not remember, a Greenbelt carve up, even though I think that's going to be a bit of a saga over the coming months and years, or strong mayors, some of those things. So, buckle up, I would say.
Okay, Reem, put up our next question. We're going to get the attendees' thoughts on what the number one issue might be facing the Ford government, and everyone can vote on this. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a couple other things while people vote, and then I'll bring up the results, but I don't want our comments to influence people. So let's come back to what you think the biggest story may be in a minute, Sabrina. Before we do that, good year, bad year coming up in general, high level, for the Ontario Liberal Party, or same. What's your forecast?
I guess it depends on your point of view here. What's good, what's bad, what side are you sitting on? I think one of the big stories is going to be the opposition parties, because obviously, we've got a new leader on the NDP side with Marit Stiles, and we're just going to have the beginnings of the Liberal Party leadership. And we've already had so much drama come out of that already, what with, some veteran folks in the old guard hoping to draft Mike Schreiner. Schreiner's thinking about it. So, that could be a lot of drama. I know a lot of Liberals aren't happy. A lot of Greens aren't happy about this. So I would say probably about the same for the Liberals. It's not like they were feeling so great after the last election. But I think that there is something to be said that they are actually having competitive races and a lot of drama, because we're all talking about it. We're all paying attention. And it certainly is more exciting than what's happening on the NDP side, which is just kind of this acclaimed leader. And don't get me wrong, there are advantages there too. Marit Stiles can kind of just focus on taking out Ford and picking up NDP spots, which they'll want to do in the next election. But I would say it's about maybe a so-so time for the Liberals.
Okay, so you mentioned the NDP, and do you think Premier Ford, and he looks back and 10 months from now, is going to think that it was a good year, or was it a tougher year? He's gone through a pretty tough year already, a couple tough years already since he's been first elected. What's your high level? And then we're going to go into reason why, maybe just in terms of would it be good or bad or ugly or not so much.
Yeah. I think this is going to be one of the tougher years for Ford. And we kind of touched on it a little bit. He's got the Greenbelt drama. We're going to see the rollout of strong mayors. What are those budgets going to look like at the municipal level? There's these negotiations with public sector workers, including teachers, which is also always, a hot issue. And so I think this year he might be batting away potential scandals, investigations, even if there's no finding of any wrongdoing. This is not a good look, and questions being raised, the opposition hammering you on this every day in the House. I think it's going to be a tough go of it, at least this year.
So what do you think? You mentioned a bunch of issues, and I agree with all of them, and that's why I put multiple ones up there. The folks online have voted. What do you think is going to be the biggest issue threatening the Ford government this year of the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, I think, the Greenbelt has the potential to be the most scandalous, I think. But at the end of the day, I think for the general population, it's going to be healthcare. And I guess I'm seeing the results pop up right now. It seems like everyone is kind of on the same page there. Healthcare is something that it's the biggest budget item we have. We're coming out of the pandemic. Folks are really feeling this on the ground, whether it's anything from, going to the pharmacy and not finding, your kid's medication, or having to go to an ER and, being turned away in some cases. And so I think this is going to be the major issue for the Ford government this year and beyond, and they're going to really have to, they've kind of been tinkering around the edges in terms of policy, for better or worse, I could say, but they're going to have to make some different changes and bolder moves in order to actually, fix something in this crisis and actually have an immediate impact, rather than, talk about training nurses down the line, that type of thing, which is of course important. But I think there's going to have to be some injection, the cash injection soon. And it sounds like that might be coming with this health meeting with the feds on the Canada Health transfers.
It's amazing the roller coaster of support and lack of support this Ford government has seen through the first mandate when the pandemic and his numbers went up, and then they bottomed out, and then they came back up. And now we'll see when the opposition starts getting permanent leaders, the difference that they might have moving forward. Sabrina, thank you. Thank you so much for making some time of your day. I know you're very busy. We did publish, we posted the link that you made available. Thanks again for that. And
it's going to be a juicy week, so sign up for the free trial and stay tuned.
Everyone should be signing up if you haven't done so already. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We're going to move back here 1 second. We're right on schedule, which I'm excited about. And there we go. Okay. So talked about the political landscape. I thought was relevant. I know people are interested to hear some expert commentary, but what the webinar was really focused on is once we understand the landscape and we know the issues of our association, how do we put it to good use? How do we communicate that message effectively to government? And I am thrilled to be joined with Grassroots colleague and my long-term friend, Ray Pons. Ray and I have known each other for an awful long time. He is a communication expert. He is a public speaker. He is a 6-year faculty member of Rockhurst University in Kansas City, where he traveled North America doing workshops and training workshops on communications, effective communications. And I remember when I started Grassroots and I told Ray about it, and Ray had not very much experience or exposure to politics. And the more that I learned about this world, I thought this comes down to fundamental communication. So Ray adds a real colorful perspective on the fundamentals of communication and how they relate to effective advocacy. So we've got a bunch of slides we're going to walk through, and Ray, I might jump in with a comment here or there, but let's get started. So
you bet. Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
Effective advocacy fundamentally comes down to effective communication. And in my part of the presentation, I'm going to deal with the principles of effective communication, much more than the how-tos. There's a fabulous book, Brian Clemmer, If How-Tos Were Enough, We Would All Be Skinny, Rich, and Happy. You know, you can't be a successful idiot. You've got to get all the knowledge that you can. But knowledge isn't enough. Action, execution, principles behind the practices, the how-tos, is what will make the biggest difference. The 4 broad styles of communication are passive, aggressive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. Next slide, Peter. Passive communication is fundamentally your rights are higher than my rights. So I sit back. I don't contribute nearly as much as the other 3 broad styles. The next style is the exact opposite, aggressive. If I'm an aggressive communicator, my rights are higher than your rights. I will interrupt easily and often and frequently, abruptly, rudely. My rights are higher than your rights, you know, so you be quiet. I'll tell you what the real truth is. The next one, many people consider to be a sort of a win-win, when in fact it's a lose-lose. Passive-aggressive communication, they believe that your rights are higher than my rights, and I must manipulate you to get what I want. Perhaps the most potentially strongest evidence of passive-aggressive communicators are Hillary and the Donald. Very acrimonious, accusatory. They don't mind besmirching, damaging the reputation of the other person. It's got to be incredibly painful living inside a passive-aggressive communicator's skin. The 4th, and the one style that can never be the wrong style, is assertive. Assertive is equal rights. My right to speak is no higher or lower than your right to speak. Your right to speak is no higher or lower than my right to speak. Those are the 4 broad styles, the broad principles of communication. Next slide, Peter. When you communicate using a combination of all of the styles. And like the personality profiles, you do tend to favor one style over the others. You'll have a tendency to feel more comfortable when the pressure is on to revert to the style that suits you best. Here's the challenge. Yep.
I was just going
Peter.
to jump in, Ray, because I know that many of us, and it was interesting having this conversation with you initially several years ago when I started going into meetings and meeting with political officials. And I think everyone on the call that will have similar experience can relate to having those meetings, whether it was with an elected official or a staffer who was passive, who sat there and said nothing, who was aggressive, who may have been negative towards a stakeholder. And then what we do in our workshops too is elaborate also on how to deal with these different types. But you're talking about the type of communication style that we all should aspire to be more effective in our messaging.
And let's face it, when you are in advocacy, you are essentially representing your industry, representing your cause, and letting it be known to the public speaking. And even seasoned business leaders who appear very confident, they all admit to possessing a fundamental fear of public speaking. I hope I don't muck this up. And added to that is the fact that all politicians feel they are overworked, overwhelmed, busy, doing it. Hey, nice to meet you. I've only got 5 minutes. What do you want? What do you want? The challenge, the higher the emotion, assertive can never be the wrong choice, but it is often the toughest choice in the moment. I believe firmly, it requires 3 distinct components. Discipline of self first. Leadership, again, leadership of self first. And choice. We have to accept that getting angry is a choice. Getting frustrated is a choice. I know I'm not the only person on this call that's ever opened mouth, insert foot. You know, and you can, when you realize that you've said the wrong thing, you can say, hey, listen, I apologize. That was uncalled for. And the other person will say, oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. The damage has already been done. So we absolutely must take control, not of them or the situation, but control of you. And I stole this from Stephen Covey. Responsibility. It is the ability to choose a response. Slow down. Don't let your frustration, your anger, your concern get the better of you. Control you, and you will be better able to influence them. Next slide. WIIFM. What's in it for me? Did we have a graphic for this, Peter? Oh, there you go. Everybody on the planet is self-centered to a large degree, particularly the ministers, the government officials, the government staff that you will be communicating with, negotiating with. The key is to focus in not immediately on what you want. It's vital that you first connect and identify what's in it for me from the government perspective, from the minister's individual perspective, from the member of parliament. What does she want? What does he want? Next slide, Peter. We have to be careful that we don't get so overwhelmed and preoccupied with what we want, your organization, your cause, you as an individual who wants to stay president of the association, president of the union body. Next slide. Attempt to figure out what the opposing party truly desires. And we have to control our cynicism. You know, you mentioned here lie in a gravestone. Here lies a politician and an honest man. And the cynic says, oh my goodness, they're burying two people in one grave these days. You know, we have to be careful of our presumptions that we have about the evil politician. Basically, all parties want the same thing. A good country, Canada. Happy people living in Canada.
It speaks often to the necessity to come, as you mentioned, with solutions and partnerships, and
there
that's
you
the
go.
whole essence of our message. For
There
those who
you
don't
go.
know the Grassroots logo, the gears that are on the bottom of the screen, we designed that years ago to explain the world of advocacy. And to me, the large two gears, one represents the private sector, the other the public sector. And effective advocacy is a small one in between that, if they do their job well, make sure that both are working harmoniously.
And we must always be cautious that we're not pitching too quick, that we're not immediately, you know, he doesn't have much time, she doesn't have much time, got to get to it. Okay, we need more money, we need more support. Without more support, there'll be, we go right into the pitch instead of comment on how this will be beneficial for the individual member of parliament, for the overall well-being of Canada, the people.
I just want to add
Canada.
one little bit of color on that. And I know there's many people on this or registered for this event that have experience, and fundamental to government relations is just that. All these folks in government, whether they're an elected official, a policy advisor, a bureaucrat, they're human beings. And if we have the ability to build that relationship over time and learn in terms of the things that they're looking for, partner with them, that's where things can really start to happen. Everybody's got a long list of problems. And as Chris alluded to before, there's no shortage of groups that are lining up in front of offices every single day to make a pitch. So understanding how yours can be received and how it relates to their challenges is critical.
Distinguish yourself, not as a bringer of problems, but as a bringer of solutions, a helper. The more, again, the principle behind the practice, the more you can focus on helping them get what they want, they are more predisposed, more likely, it's not a guarantee, but the more that you help them get what they're looking for, they'll be more likely to help you get what you want.
And Ray, this is a fundamental truth in communications across all sectors, not just lobbying and government advocacy. It's the corporate world, it's sales, it's everything else, right?
You betcha. Absolutely. You want to have more productive staff on your team. Focus on what they want. They don't want stress, pressure, anxiety. You know, they want validation. They want empowerment. Yes, you need to be able to demand that they do what they were hired to do, but not by coercion, by persuasion. Overcoming fears. Anytime you feel nervous about any phobia, particularly public speaking, it all comes down to FUDs, fears, uncertainties, doubts, suspicions. That's the root cause of nerves. Great, simple advice from Emerson. All the great speakers were at first bad speakers. You know, having been a public speaker delivering keynotes and workshops and all-day training sessions, I've come to the realization that it's a never-ending journey toward excellence. You know, the good news of the thousands of presentations that I've done, there were some colossal crash and burns. and I'm still here. You give a lousy presentation, they won't take you out the back and shoot you. You'll learn from the experience. I know. You say, no, that was a crash and burn. That was a disaster. That was a failure. Okay. But to tell yourself it was a failure, it kills your creativity. Tell yourself, wow, that was a big learning experience. Don't want to do that again. You critically must handle your fears, awareness. Next slide, Peter. You have to acknowledge what took place. You have to put in a renewed effort, and you have to practice. If you cannot acknowledge that something went wrong, you'll never get better. Success is almost totally dependent upon drive. Go back one, Peter, please. I want them to see that. The extra energy required to make another effort or try another approach, that's the secret to winning. Vitally important that if what you're doing doesn't work, don't keep doing what you've been doing. That'll drive you bonkers. It'll not just frustrate you, it'll frustrate the hell out of the person that you are attempting to communicate with. And you know what? We all know this. I know I'm not the only person on this call who has ever said something to his wife and immediately regretted it. You know, we know, when I say that everybody on this call knows what to do to be more effective at advocacy, well, that may not be fully true, but we know very crystal clear what not to do. Raising your voice, never a good idea. Threatening, never a good idea. The more you can focus on the principles and acknowledge when you drop the ball, make another effort, and practice. You've heard this saying, practice makes perfect. Well, it doesn't. You know, if I go to the driving range to try and become a better golfer, and I just keep hitting the ball the way I've always hit the ball, I'm never going to get better. If I go, and you know, this is a blatant pitch. If I go with a golf coach that can give me the inside scoop, the inside secrets, maybe I'll never become Tiger Woods. I know that's the case, but maybe I can go from a 20 handicap hacker to a 10 handicap improvement. Don't be afraid to ask for help to guide your practice in ways that do result in improvement.
And I would add to that, Ray, from an advocacy standpoint, you know, talking about practice and looking at your pitch, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the whole narrative and the message and approach you take, even if your communication skills are rock solid, doesn't work. And you may not know that when you first go to government or start speaking with them. And it's very valuable to sit back and also reflect with other experts in terms of, okay, this didn't work. What might work? How might we reframe this message and go forward and take another shot at it? So that's very important.
And certainly my association with you, with Chris, I know communication. You know, it's not bragging if it's the truth. But you two have helped me to navigate within the government environment. It is a very unique area of specialization. Thanks, Peter. Back to you.
Well, thank you, Ray. And we're well ahead of schedule, which I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with. Everyone hung in there that logged in, which was a great sign, I believe. I'm open if anyone wanted to post any questions or ask anything. I see a couple of comments here in the chat box. Someone was asking about what Ford is under investigation for. I believe the focus and the suggestions from the conversation with Sabrina was just around the possibility of investigation around the Greenbelt lands that were opened up. There still hasn't been an investigation launched yet, but there has been some filings made by the NDP and other environmental groups that are looking into it, and police are actually looking into it to see whether it's worthy of an investigation, if there's any potential corruptions or wrongdoings there. So that will be something that various opposition groups and media will be monitoring very closely in the coming days and weeks. Jennifer Lehman asked, when you're advocating with minister and departments, do you ask what it is they want and try to fit the client's needs into that? Great question. You could ask them. My recommendation, Ray, and then I'll turn it over to you on this one, is any good advocacy effort involves some research. And in the case of issues, this is where I believe people like those of us that work at Grassroots provide value, is that we should be providing clients, or you might have the resources yourself to do it already, is what is the issues and the priorities of the government currently? What are the various priorities that are on their plate coming out from their mandate letters or their budget? What are the concerns they have? Sometimes you're working with an industry that is at odds with government over a particular issue. Other times you might find yourself potentially on the right side of things in terms of what you're pitching. I'll just give you a very sort of simple example. Last year, when the provincial government brought out their budget, the first post-pandemic budget, they made it very clear that their primary focus moving forward was making investments to restore the healthcare system. We might argue that that's going to take a lot more than one single year, and also making investments to ensure the economy would rebound. That was their focus. So I was always advising clients on their issues and concerns about how we could frame it in that narrative to make it relevant.
Yeah, professionals prepare. So do your homework. Find out what you believe is important to the individual that you are visiting. If you know that you are visiting with a driver who has a tendency to be an aggressive communicator, the worst thing you can do is become a driver when asking questions. Okay, Fred, I know that you're a good get it done kind of guy. What do you want? What do you want from me? Far too blunt. You won't get, if you ask those closed-ended questions, you'll frequently get a closed-ended answer. You've got to be subtle. I understand that the highest priority for this government is managing healthcare and managing the economy. Why is that, Fred?
I would also say too, that is a great opportunity to build a bond immediately with the people that you're speaking with.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that issue. Say I read something last week, we're all well aware, and you'll get the nodding heads, and then the audience that you're speaking to is aware that you're aware of the issues on their plate and their minds. So building that bridge very early is important.
One thing that we have not covered at all today because of time restrictions is becoming a powerhouse listener. And listening is something that is very noticeable in advocacy. It is noticeable by its absence, not its presence. And the more that you can distinguish yourself as being actively engaged in listening, not hearing. There's a major difference between hearing what the other person is saying and truly focusing in and genuinely listening to the other person. And that's applicable with your colleagues, with advocacy representatives within government staff, your kids, your family, the people you get in contact with at your church, temple, synagogue, everywhere. Be a listener, not a hearer.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're going to wrap up. I think this has been great. We'd like to finish ahead of time, if not on time. And as mentioned off the top, you're going to be getting a link with an opportunity to provide us some valuable feedback. And as mentioned, also, we are really looking forward to potentially hosting another in-person workshop. We'd like your thoughts on whether you're interested to attend, whether Toronto or Ottawa, and that's where we've done ones previously, would be of more interest to you. And we'll keep the conversation going. So thank you to everyone that joined from wherever you are. We will be in touch. Have a great day and make the most of the coming months with all your advocacy efforts within your organization. Have a great day.